so what I'm trying to say is these types of people, and I'm almost sure that everyone who is hearing this has had an experience like that. They're very difficult to know, to recognize at first glance, because they can seem very caring and compassionate or very interesting, or as I said, very dramatic, very emotional. And as you get to know them after weeks, after months, you become embroiled in all of their tragedies, their problems, their misery, and they bring you down. And it's like there's nothing you can do to help them. This is the course of their life. And I'm trying to say, here's how to recognize these types of people. Maybe you'll never encounter them, and that's great for you, but often you will. Here's how to recognize them. And the only solution is, if you recognize them, get away. Because the moment they get their tentacles into your life, they will tend to draw you down, and you'll have a hard time getting away from it. And I show an example of someone from history, a woman, Lola Montez, who's very famous in the 19th century, a beautiful woman who was, at first glance, incredibly seductive, and every single man that got involved with her ended up ruining his own life, including King of Bavaria, who was forced to abdicate because of his involvement of Lola Montez. So she's sort of the classic icon of infection. And these are the types of people to avoid. And if you can, associate with those who are the opposite, who seem to have a positive energy about them, who seem to attract good things to their life. I did a book with 50 Cent, the rapper, and you wouldn't associate this at all with him. You probably associate violence and thuggery or whatever. In fact, 50 is a very positive person who's overcome incredibly difficult circumstances in life and is doing some really good things in charity-wise, and the people who work for him. He's very charismatic, and being around him makes you confident, makes you excited and happy and enthused about being alive. Those are the people you want to associate with, and the Lola Montezes, if you encounter them, you want to get the hell away.
That was very clear. That was very clear. And your chapter was very clear, but I just wanted to give the context for it because, I've seen also on several videos on YouTube just show chapter headings, and yeah. I think people will get the wrong idea if they don't read them. Question about a big theme in your life and influence had to do with the book Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I wondered if you could just say a couple of sentences about that.
Well, I read it when I was in high school. It was back in my day. You had to read essays of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I don't know if that's still the case. And I read on Self-Reliance, and I thought it was so powerful, particularly for my life, that I actually memorized the whole thing. I can still remember bits and pieces now, but I would never be able to repeat that phenomenon now. And what struck me then was the kind of extreme clarity of this essay. And it's the fact that it's not that you're completely independent in life. The fact that you were born and born into a culture and a community and a family, you are dependent on other people. You are dependent on your mother and your father and your family and your community to survive. But a point is reached when you must develop, as far as humanly possible, your own self-reliance and come to this existential point where you realize that essentially you were born alone into this world and you are going to die alone, and you need to be accountable for, as far as you possibly can, for all of your actions. And to the degree that you're not, it's almost like your laziness, your desire to be dependent, your desire to blame other people in your life. You are always going to fall back on that crutch unless you embed in your head this idea that you can have responsibility, that you can take control of as many aspects of your life as possible. And so this was an essay that is so beautifully written because he was a person who was also very religious, transcendentalist, So he writes almost like a preacher, and it's just beautiful, beautiful prose, 19th century American writing. But it's just showing you that you don't have to worship other people. You don't have to think, oh, he's a genius or she's a genius, I'll never be able to reach that. It's in every human being has this potential. It's within you, and you have to simply become more self-reliant. And there's my latest book with 50 Cent, The 50th Law, is just filled with the image of that essay and Ralph Waldo Emerson and the idea that you're afraid of taking this step because it's easy to always think that it's the other person that is ruining your life or circumstance. And this is like the antidote to that particular essay.
Don't you think that in not just the industrial age, but the age of electronics and the internet and computers and cell phones and chips and this expedited electronic world, don't you think that people are less self-reliant than they were in the past? In the 1800s, people were more self-reliant. You talked about that.
Yeah, they are. I mean, in America, it usually is a situation where where a country, a community, a city, a civilization is just starting out, and things are difficult. People are experiencing difficult circumstances. And the United States in the 19th century was a time of expansion. We were just starting to become a world power. And so there was this pioneer spirit. Everybody was sort of on the same page. And there was wealth and things out there that you could get, but you had to work really hard to get there. And so it made you, we talk about, for instance, Yankee ingenuity, which is simply an expression of New Englanders, because the soil in New England is not very conducive to farming. New Englanders traditionally had to become incredibly ingenious in order to get anything out of the soil. And so the expression came of Yankee ingenuity. Out of necessity, people become self-reliant and become ingenious. And it's the story of civilization or empire after empire that when you've reached that prosperity, you lose that sense of necessity and closeness to your environment and to that sort of existential reality that you could fail in life. And people become softer, and they take things for granted. And so we've lost a lot of that pioneering spirit. John F. Kennedy tried to bring that back a little bit in the 1960s with a concept like the New Frontier. But in general, I think a lot of the malaise, to use a Jimmy Carter word that he suffered for, that we're suffering now is the sense that we've lost our national sense of purpose, and we're drifting. So people don't have the feel that they need to be self-reliant, that they need to be independent and take control of their lives. They can rely on technology. They can rely on that Wikipedia to do their instant research for them. And I show very clearly in the 50th Law that if you're not developing on your own inside of you skills of self-reliance and knowing how to get things for yourself, there's going to come a point when you can't rely on the technology, you can't rely on other people, and you're going to suffer really bad for that. And so this is like something as elemental as learning how to read or learning math or algebra or learning these skills, because you're going to need them for your whole life.
When you talked about one of the laws having to do with not outshining the master, Law 1, can you talk a little bit about how Galileo put that law into effect for himself with the Medici family?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I call the observance of the law. In other words, most people in life make the mistake of outshining the master. I've done it myself. In our zeal to prove ourselves at a job or working for someone else, we try so hard to please that we actually make the boss, the master, the person above us insecure that maybe that we're better than he or she is, and we suffer for it. And I explained very in depth why and how that happens. Now, how can you turn that around? Well, the idea is while you're at the same time trying to work as well as you possibly can and appear